Hi guys, so we are continuing to explore transparency. You guys are going to be making a composition. Start with a square piece of watercolor paper, the heaviest paper that you have. Mine here is, it's 10 by 10. I believe that's correct. So what I am going to do on this paper is I'm going to repeat one shape. It doesn't matter what shape that is, but I'm going to need it to be precise. So I'm going to make just a paper stencil of whatever I want to repeat as my shape. It could be a simple shape like circles or squares or diamonds. It could be something like, a heart shape. I cut this out of some scrap watercolor paper, which is good because it's kind of heavier than just regular paper. So I can use this. Made another one that's like a teardrop shape. I like this one a lot. I think I'm going to use this one. I think I was thinking, Valentine's Day with this guy. Now, you can make any kind of shape that you want. It doesn't have to be a simple sort of geometric shape or a simple organic shape. It could be something really complicated. If you wanted to do a bunch of, whales, or if you wanted to do like an octopus kind of silhouette, as long as it's a silhouette, it should work pretty well. So just the outline of a shape. So that is up to you to choose. You're going to want to cut out one of the shape so that you can repeat it over and over again. So if you're choosing a more complicated shape, you're going to trace it out into the paper and cut it out. So yeah, I am going to use the raindrop kind of shape, teardrop shape. And what you're going to do is you are going to repeat it on your paper a minimum of 9 times. You do want to activate the whole page, so if you've got a small shape, you might want to put a lot more. Let me just say from 9 to infinity shapes on your page is what I want to see. Don't stop at 9. You don't feel like you have to stop at 9 if it's not right for your paper and the size of your shape. You can make as many as you want. So what you're going to do is you're going to lay these on the page and you are going to trace your shape many times. Okay, so when you make a shape, you don't want to go too heavy with the pencil because we are going to have to erase it a little bit before we do the watercolor. But when you make a shape, you are going to need to overlap it with another shape. So I've got one here. I'm going to lay my teardrop shape so it goes over top of it before I trace the next one. Okay, so every shape should be overlapping another shape. If you get a little bit off, you can just come back and erase it. So I'm going to try to put this on the page in a way that activates the whole space. I can go off the edge with my shapes if I want to. That might make my composition more interesting. I do have to overlap though. So I'm going to have to be thoughtful about how I do it. Now I do have to make at least 9 shapes. I can make as many as I want to make my paper, my composition interesting. I don't want to have a lot of dead space. But that is not to say you need to fill up every bit of negative space in your composition. It's just be thoughtful about where you're putting it and realize, the negative space has a shape just like the positive shapes do. We're dealing with the positive shapes of the teardrop. What kind of negative shape do I want to see? How is that going to affect my whole composition? Okay, I feel like I've gone a lot this way. I could go, in another direction if I wanted to. I gotta start twisting it. Make them more irregular. make this one feel like it's just kind of going off the edge. It's barely kind of touching this other one. It's a little bit more organic, I guess. So maybe I like this space in here, this negative space in here, and I want to leave that. I might think about where else I could put these. I could turn it upside down totally. I could do some that are going in this direction, some that are going in that direction. It's up to me how I want to arrange these. But every shape needs to overlap another shape. It can overlap more than one shape, but it needs to overlap at least one. And again, I can go off the edge if I want to. All right. I'm kind of liking this shape in here. I like some of this, but I feel like maybe I want to have something happen up this top side. Yeah, I feel like it needed something up there. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 shapes now. The one thing I do notice is I've got one shape up here that's not overlapped by anything or overlapping anything. So let me maybe just try to fix that by layering in another shape here. I'm gonna kind of turn this one a little bit. This one's gonna be kind of a bridge between those two areas. Okay, now I've got my teardrop shapes. The next thing's gonna be to choose the colors I want to use. Now I can use any of my 12 hues from my color wheel. I can use any colors that I can mix beyond those. So I can use tints of all those colors. I can use shades, I can use tints of all those hues. I can use shades of all those hues. I know that I'm going to be using transparency, so probably better, at least on the first pass, to keep those paints just a little bit on the transparent side. Okay, so before I start painting, what I'm going to want to do is use my kneaded eraser, or if you don't have your kneaded eraser with you, any eraser will do. A bigger eraser is easier. And what you want to do is just pass this over your graphite. I probably made this a little bit darker than I needed to so it would show up on camera. But if you can start a little lighter than this, you probably have to do a little less erasing. I don't want to take it totally off the page. I just want to lighten it so it doesn't interfere too much with my painting. Okay. All right, so now I can choose from any of my hues. I can choose their tints. I can choose their shades. I am going to, anytime they overlap one another, that is going to be a place where the hue that's in this shape will mix with the hue that's in that shape through transparency. All right. So I'll be able to see the color that's underneath the other one, see what's layered on top of it. So I can choose any colors that I want to. I'm going to take a look at my color palette here and make some decisions. Again, if you can start a little light, that's going to help you. For some reason, I'm feeling some pinky kind of warm colors. Maybe some violets. So, all right, so I'm just going to jump in and pick one to paint. And I'm shooting for filling up this shape with my color, and only this shape. Okay. I chose to go with a tint of a kind of red-orange color, so the net effect is sort of like a purpley kind of pinky fuchsia color. So there's one color down. I am not going to want to color in the ones that are directly overlapping them next, because if I paint with wet paint into this, it's just going to bleed into this color. That will be the wet into wet technique. So I need to let this fully dry before I try to paint any transparencies over it. That means you're gonna have to kind of be mindful of what's wet on your page and hop around a little bit with your color. Paint in different sections at a time. I like that color a lot. I'm gonna try a deeper, more saturated version of that color. And I've chosen a shape that does not overlap that first one, because I'm gonna have to let that first one dry before I paint more into it. Now you can choose whatever hues that you would like, but it helps, you know, to consider a way of organizing them rather than just jumping in blindly and working randomly. Random can get you, you know, some good results, some unexpected things sometimes, but, you know, some ways, if you're really stumped on what colors to use, you can look at your color harmonies or color scheme. So you could use a complementary color scheme, colors that are across from each other on the color wheel, or you could use analogous colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. You could try, if you're feeling fancy, you could try a split complement, or you could try a triad or a tetrad. Those are always good ways to organize color. They are tried and true. We know those colors are going to look great with each other. Remember, if you choose any of those color schemes, you know, you can always have tints, tones, and shades of those colors to work with. I didn't mention monochromatic. Monochromatic is also a great choice. So, of course, monochromatic is one hue, and it's tints, tones, and shades. So if I continue to paint these all in different tints, tones, and shades of this sort of fuchsia color, my painting would be monochromatic. I don't think that I will do that. I'm going to try some different colors. Those are good ways to organize your color. You could choose all warm colors. You could choose all cool colors. You could choose colors that remind you of a particular place or a particular time of day. There's other ways to think about color. You could choose colors that have a certain mood in your mind. Maybe colors that feel happy or colors that feel sad. There's all sorts of ways of organizing yourself that don't have to feel really limiting. They can give you some structure, but still allow you a lot of freedom. Okay, so I'm going to choose one that is not going to overlap with this. I have to keep spreading this out. Because remember, again, if I were to paint on top of one of these that's still wet, I would not be getting glazing. I would be getting blending happening through the wet into wet technique, which means my colors are not going to be sharp. They're not going to be laying in a thin film one on top of the other, which is what glazes are. They will be mixed together instead. That is not a bad technique, it's just not the technique that we are using today. We are practicing our glazing. And, you know, depending on the medium you're using, it's possible to get this effect in other painting mediums as well. You can glaze an oil paint, for instance, by adding some linseed oil or any other mediums to your paint, many other types of medium to your paint to make it more transparent. And if you're using acrylic paint, sometimes people use water to dilute it. That is okay. There's another way to do it. If you want a more viscous glaze, you can mix it with acrylic medium and you'll get that transparency, but your paint won't be so thin. Watercolor is already thin, so we just have to be careful where we put it and how dry it is. All right, got a nice purple color there. Maybe since I've got, maybe that's my pattern. So I've got a tint of a color and a stronger version of that color. So maybe I'll find another place to put a stronger version of that. Like I said, you know, composition, that color composition, you have to think not only about what colors you want to include, but where you're placing them. Our eyes tend to be very good at finding patterns, and you know, where you're placing them on the page kind of creates a pattern. I could put it here. I could put it here, or I could put it here based on what's currently available to paint on, because my first space isn't dry yet. I feel like this might be the best choice. And, you know, I'm coming to that, you know, trying to see like, okay, how would this space I'm choosing connect with the original one? I felt like that had the most interesting movement. It's a very subjective choice, so, you know, best to not overthink it. Just get in there and give it a try. Okay, I've got, it looks like one more I could do before I have to let it dry for a little while. All right, so at this point, I'm gonna have to let it sit and dry before I can do any more to it. Fear not, I have brought a second painting along while that one dries. I've already done my five shapes that I could get to. I've got 4 overlapping shapes here. This is totally dry, so I can paint these 4 overlapping shapes. Again, I'm using transparency here. I want to see the colors that are underneath showing through. And I let this dry 100%, the layer that's underneath, before I did this, because this would not work. These colors would just blend right into each other instead of making glazes. Glazes are dry layers of paint sitting on top of each other instead of mixing together. So you see a thin film of one color through the color that's underneath it. Okay, so you can see all 3 of these colors distinctly underneath this glaze, so I just have to do my last 3 colors. And for this one I chose, I based it around the secondary colors. You can use tints, tones, and shades of any of the hues that you choose to use. And there's no limit on what hues you choose to use. Oh my gosh. But I strongly encourage you to consider an organization strategy for yourself. Like I said, you can choose to do your color harmonies. Warm colors, cool colors. I'm choosing to make these kind of slight variations of secondary colors. So my green, my purple, my oranges. Because those colors are going to have a relationship to each other. Okay, got one more to go.